Good morning, Boker Tov. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to switch one thing here, and we will be ready to go. I want to dedicate this morning's shiur for the continued refuah of Reb Chaim Kramer, Reb Chaim Menachem ben Leah, as well as to our dear brother Nisim ben Avram, and Adina Bas Sarah. And Bezrat Hashem betoch shar cholei Yisrael. So you know we're so fascinated by Rav Kook. We spent so much time learning about Rav Kook in the city of Hebron, and now we're in the midst of learning about Rav Kook and the Hasidei Breslov. And Bezrat Hashem, the next we already have a next series which would be Rav Kook and the relationship with the Chafetz Chaim. So we have. Baruch Hashem, we're going to learn about Rav Kook. We're going to learn a lot about his Torahs, but we're going to learn so much about him regarding his relationship with other people, with other prominent figures, and with Pshutei Ha'am as well, and with simpletons as well. But it's just such a privilege, and it's so important, I feel, to be learning about Rav Kook Dafka now during the 3 weeks, because if there was one person that we could go to with confidence and ask them, Ribono Shleilam, please send us to, ask the Hashem, please send us to one person who could probably get us out of this rut of ahavas, of sinas chinam. It's pretty clear that Rav Kook would be top. Rav Kook would be mamish top. He would be the one to be able to help us get out of there. Okay, so having said all that, today's shir is really fascinating. It's very exciting for me. In terms of learning, we're going to be learning Lamaisa one very important and interesting and intriguing letter, but we're going to see we're going to hear a lot of names, and we're going to see a lot of pictures. Now, I want you to know that all the names and pictures you're going to be seeing today is just a little bit of a prep for something that we're planning on Elul. And I was debating whether to share this now or not, but I think that in the context of today's shir, it fits in perfectly. In Elul, we're beginning a new course. And that new course will be the learning about and the teachings of the giants in Breslov in the last generation that really brought Rabbi Nachman from Uman to Yerushalayim and to the rest of the world. Many of these people, we mentioned one of them earlier in the week, which is Reb Levi Yitzchak Bender, whose yahrzeit was 2 days ago. But you're going to be hearing a lot of names today, a lot of names and pictures of some of the most righteous people. The more I'm researching their lives, the more I'm learning about them, the more I realize that it's uncovering pure gold, mamish pure gold, with very specific ramifications and implications in regarding our world today. So a lot of these names today that you're going to be seeing today and that we're going to be speaking about today, we're just going to briefly touch upon them, but I'm just saying already right now, don't worry. We will be learning plenty about them later, plenty. We already have a 1.5 years of material on these giants. If we learn them on a weekly basis, we already have a 1.5 years, and the truth is it could be extended easily into 2 to 3 year course. But I just wanted to whet the appetite and get us excited, start as where we're heading towards. But what's so beautiful and what's so tremendous about when we speak about the world of Rabbi Nachman, what's amazing is that up until recent research, no one could really say that there were that many connections. There are a few references we see here and there. Rav Moshe Tzvi Neria Zecher Tzadik Livracha mentions a few times, a few connections, as well as we'll be seeing Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook, Rav Kook's son, speak about his personal connection to the Torah of Rabbi Nachman. But what we're going to be learning today is about the Breslovers who felt at home in the home of Rav Kook. And as you know, in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Kook had 2 homes. Beginning in 1904 till 1914, Rav Kook was in Yafo. Following that, after him going for a few years to Chutz La'aretz because he got stuck there during World War I, so we all know that Rav Kook then comes back and becomes the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. and then of Eretz Yisrael. But those first years in Yafo are going to be very helpful for us today to understand some incredible connections, some really incredible connections. So I guess what we can do right now is I want to tell you a little bit about some of the people that would hang out with Rav Kook and that felt very close to him. The first giant, literally the giant that we have is someone that we don't have a picture of. I don't know why we don't have a picture of him, but it's very painful to me. But it's someone that I've been learning so much about. And his name was Rabbi Avram Khazam. He's known as Rabbi Avram Bereb Nachman's. As you see over here, this is his famous sefer called Biur HaLikutim. Biur HaLikutim is a sefer of explaining Likutei Moharan in a very unique way. Rabbi Avram Bereb Nachman, the son of Reb Nachman, is not the son of Reb Nachman Breslover, but Rabbi Avram Khazam is from the town of Tulchin in Russia. Rabbi Avram Khazam's father was the famous Rabbi Nachman of Tulchin, and Rabbi Nachman of Tulchin was the top prime student of Reb Nosson Breslover. So again, Reb Nosson Breslover's student is Rabbi Nachman of Tulchin. Rabbi Nachman Tulchin's son is Rabbi Avram Khazam. I think he called him Khazam because he was the Khazam there in Uman. And Rabbi Avram Khazam is someone that made it to Eretz Yisrael, and then he would come back and travel back to Uman for Rosh Hashanah in the early 20th century. And at the end, the last 4 years of his life, due to World War I, he gets stuck in Uman, in Ukraine, and dies there. But while he was in Eretz Yisrael, he established a very beautiful kesher with Rav Kook, and we'll speak about this. The truth is, we'll just jump to this right now, that Rav Kook said about this Reb Avram Khazam. He said about him, he's a Baal Moyach Gadol, he's a tremendous mind, a Gaon b'Kabbalah. For Rav Kook to say about him, he's a Gaon in Kabbalah is pretty cool. And he says he's a Moach Shel HaOlam, he's the mind, the brain of the world. And unfortunately, I say this with hesitance because I'm still not 1,000,000% certain I got all the details about the following item, the following issue. This Reb Avram Khazam, his sefer that you see in front of you, Biur HaLikutim, he got a haskama from Rav Kook on Biur HaLikutim. However, the Kanaim, the Zealots in Breslov, would not hear of such a thing, and they did not allow the haskama of Rabbi Avram Khazam, of Rav Kook, to be placed in this very special sefer, Biur HaLikutim. And whenever Rabbi Avram Khazam Rabbi Nachman would travel back to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, so he would always spend time with Rav Kook because it would always pass through Yafo to get to the port, to then dock from there. And he would always spend time with Rav Tzvi Yehuda and Rav Kook, young Rav Tzvi Yehuda and Rav Kook in Yafo. It was always like a very special time of the year in Elul where they knew that Rabbi Avram Bereb Nachman would come and spend time with them. One of the stories is that a very difficult shaila came to Rav Kook and he didn't know about it. He wasn't sure what the answer was. And he was discussing it with his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda, and it was summertime. And the word was that Rav Kook said, don't worry, Rabbi Avram Bereb Nachman is going to be here soon, and we can ask him. So there was tremendous kavod, tremendous love and admiration between these two very holy people. The next person that we have that spends a lot of time with Rav Kook is someone who we don't know a lot about at all, and we don't have a picture of him, and that is Reb Shmuel Heschel Friedman. We do have a picture of his matzeva. Now, Reb Shmuel Heschel Friedman, as you see over here on the bottom, he passes away Tuf Reish Ayin Dalid. Tuf Reish Ayin Dalid, I believe, is 1914. I'm just trying to get out of full mode. 1 second. Okay. So Shmuel Heschel Friedman, tragically, it's a very sad story. We don't know a lot about him, but we actually we have some very important information. He was killed by a bomb that was thrown from a German aircraft onto Yaffo during World War I. And 3 other Yidden were killed with him. Now, he did leave a diary, which I actually bought 2 days ago, called Toldos Shmuel, which I'm very excited to delve into. I mamish just got it like 2 days ago in the Breslov bookstore. And Reb Shmuel Friedman, he kept this diary, and throughout his diary, he speaks extensively about all his very special moments that he had with Rav Kook in Yaffo, spending time at his Shalosh Shuddis, spending time learning with him. And in his diary, Reb Shmuel describes a lot of things that will help us paint a complete picture when we learn about the first generation of Breslover Chassidim that came to Eretz Yisrael. So that's Reb Shmuel Friedman. He was the next person that spent a lot of time. The next person that spent a lot of time with Rav Kook is someone who next week we're going to be giving a whole shiur just on his relationship with Rav Kook, and that is the famous Reb Shmuel Horowitz. Reb Shmuel Horowitz, this is a young picture of Reb Shmuel Horowitz. We have a lot of pictures of Reb Shmuel Horowitz. We also have a very extensive lifeline, a timeline of Reb Shmuel's life, his Torahs, his letters, the way he got into the whole story. I did not want to get too much into it right now because his relationship with Rav Kook is something very special that we plan on learning extensively next week. But keep these eyes and this person in mind, Reb Shmuel Horowitz, who was born into a Lubavitch family, who eventually finds a home in Rebbe Nachman's Torah and is terrorized by other people in his family and friends for being into Rebbe Nachman. But we'll speak more about him, Bezrat Hashem, next week. The next very interesting person that many of you will recognize right now that had a kesher to Rav Kook is the famous Saba Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael Dov Odesser, the one who found the Petek of Nachman Me'uman. I'm not going to get into that. I don't know if ever, but definitely not now. But this Rabbi Yisrael Dov Odesser was the one that told us that he knew or he saw that Rav Kook would stand on his balcony in Yaffo while he was learning Likutei Halachas, and when he would sit and learn, he was basically in such an ecstasy, with such enthusiasm that everyone knew and everyone saw that when Rav Kook is learning and he's engaged with so much energy, he was learning Reb Noson's Likutei Halachas. And Rabbi Yisrael Dov Odesser had a very beautiful and long relationship with Rav Kook, a close relationship to Rav Kook. The next person that we're going to be learning also a lot about when we learn about the Breslover Chassidim is the famous Rosh Yeshiva of the Breslover Yeshiva in Mea She'arim. He is also the Rosh Yeshiva of our dear teacher, Reb Chaim Kramer. And Reb Chaim mentions him all the time. He's also the best friend and someone who spent heaven and hell with Reb Levi Yitzchak Bender, who we spoke about earlier this week. And this is the very special and holy Reb Eliyahu Chaim Rosen. You see him in the middle over here, Reb Eliyahu Chaim Rosen. Oh, these names, we're just name dropping, and I'm showing you some pictures, but we're speaking about giants, Pashut giants. Reb Eliyahu Chaim Rosen made it from the Ukraine to Eretz Yisrael. I'm not going to go into his life right now because it's just, we will have time, Bezrat Hashem, for that. The next Yid, the Breslover Chassid who was close. These are all Breslover Chassidim that were close to Rav Kook. The next Yid that was close to Rav Kook is someone who's a little bit less known, but he's brought down quite often. His name is Reb Moshe Yaroslavsky. I think we have a picture of him, Reb Moshe Yaroslavsky, correct? Reb Moshe Yaroslavsky, did I send his picture? No, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll find his picture. We will get to him next. Reb Moshe Yaroslavsky was another one of the Talmidim. And Rabbi Israel Karduner, who we don't have a picture of as well. And another one of the greats that would spend time by Rav Kook was Reb Meir Anshin. I think we have a picture of Reb Meir Anshin. Yeah, on the right. Another giant, another great. Reb Shmuel Meir Anshin, he lived in Yafo. He lived quite close to Rav Kook. And he was dirt poor, so he used to basically kind of live and eat in Rav Kook's home until he would be able to stand on his own 2 feet. And Rav Anshin's wife, she gave aid, she testified, she said that her husband, Rav Shmuel Meir Anshin, and Rav Kook would spend time alone for an hour a day behind when they would close the door, and they would delve deep into Kabbalah. And another story about is that, like, one time at Shalashudis at Rav Kook's home, Rav Kook noticed Rav Meir, and he was in intense dveikus. So Rav Kook asked Rav Shmuel Meir Anshin, he said, what do you think about these Torahs that I'm saying in Shalashudis? So Rav Shmuel Meir Anshin says to him that these words are so incredible, the words you said are so incredibly elated and exalted that he doubts if they're meant for human beings, but he thinks that it's meant for Mashiach alone. So their relationship was very, very special, and they were very close to each other. And we have a whole series just on this tzaddik that you see over here, Reb Shmuel Meir Anshin. Again, these are just tastes of what's Bezrat Hashem about to come. The next giant that we have in Breslov, who spends time by Rav Kook, is another person who we have a lot to learn about. And here's a picture of him when he's young, and that's the famous Reb Hirsch Leib Lippel. Reb Hirsch Leib Lippel, I mean, look at these eyes. Reb Hirsch Leib Lippel is going to play a very big role in the world of Breslov, but he too spends precious time by Rav Kook, specifically at Rav Kook's Shalashudis in Yerushalayim. The next person that we have that also spends time by Rav Kook, and it specifically comes, it was a known thing, there were Breslovers that would come to Rav Kook in Yerushalayim, is a very holy Yidler named Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Kalmanovich. This is the only picture I was able to find. If you're able to find other pictures of him, I'd be very grateful. He's also from that generation that would come and spend time by Rav Kook. And the next person that we have is it's very interesting and fascinating, and that is Reb Shmuel Chechik. Reb Shmuel Chechik, you see him over here, this is when he finally was able to get to Uman for the first time. Reb Shmuel Chechik was the son of one of Rav Kook's secretaries. Reb Shmuel Chechik's father was Rabbi Avram Chaim Chechik, and he was Rav Kook's meshamish in Yerushalayim. This is a picture of him in his later years, but there is a picture of him with Rav Kook that I think many of you have seen. It's the next one. Rav Kook to your left, this is a famous picture. Now, I have spent a lot of time on this picture, and I believe that the picture of Rav Shmuel Chechik's father, of Avram Chaim Chechik, is to Rav Kook's left, meaning to our right in front of us. But I have to double check that and verify which one of the three he is. I believe that's him. So this is already a personal connection that this Chassid's son, this Chassid, Reb Shmuel Chechik, his father was Rav Kook's meshamish. What's very, very interesting is that when Rav Kook goes to the famous inauguration, well, it's basically the cornerstone that was placed for Hebrew U in 1928. Rav Kook goes with 4 escorts. 3 of them were Breslover Hasidim. 2 out of the 3 we know of, it was Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Kalmanovich and Reb Avram Chaim Chechik. These are some pictures. This is Lord Balfour speaking at the cornerstone of the Hebrew University in 1928. We have a few other pictures, amazing pictures. I'm sure you've seen this. This is Rav Kook speaking there. His words there were very famously documented and have been learned for many years. You'll see a few more shots. Yeah, this picture breaks my heart. This is unbelievable. Harat Sofim, 1928, Yerushalayim. Rav Kook, look at that light, that beaming light standing up in the middle of the world, proclaiming to the world that we could do it. We could bring more and more light. We could lekadesh et hachomer. We could sanctify the mundane. This was a key piece of Rav Kook's whole world and whole hashkafa. So these were just a list of the main characters in Breslov that Rav Kook spent time with, and that Rav Kook was very influenced by, and that these people were very influenced by Rav Kook. And again, this is stuff that is not known at all. In fact, I had a very humbling moment in my life about 6 or 7 years ago. About 7 years ago, I think. I was in New York and I was speaking under a chuppah of very close friends of ours. And the chuppah was Gimel Elul. Gimel Elul is the yahrzeit of Rav Kook. And I said, in honor of the yahrzeit of Rav Kook, I want to share something that's very connected to Rav Kook and to Rabbi Nachman. And then I said over the story we said last week, how Rav Kook said about himself that he is the neshama of Rabbi Nachman. And it was a very high chuppah, and it was very holy. And I must have said something that I felt very good about. Why am I sharing this with you? Because I was feeling so amazing and so much feeling their lights. And after the chuppah, some Rav comes up to me and says to me, I never heard such shtus before in my life. I never heard someone outright lie under a chuppah before like you did. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Rav Kook and Rabbi Nachman, have you lost your mind? So I said, if you're a real Breslover, what are you supposed to do when someone says that to you? Yishma bizyono yidom veishtok. At that moment, it's a tremendous opportunity to cleanse yourself and to be quiet and to not feel like you need to answer and to not feel like you need to respond, but to stand there and just take it. It's an incredible moment of self-refinement and whatnot. But I was not, and I probably still am not on that level. And I told this person, I said, you think I'd make something like this up? I heard it from my Rebbe, Rav Weinberger. He said, nonsense, there's no way. I'm telling you, there's no way. And it's because these things really were not known. These connections were not known. There are reasons behind it. And one of the reasons why these connections were not known was because of Be'ezrat Hashem. What's happening now is that we are removing Rav Kook from any categories and labels. Was Rav Kook a fervent Zionist? I don't know. I know a lot of people today that are fervent Zionists, and I would never put them in the same group as Rav Kook. Was Rav Kook Hasidish? I don't know. Some people say he was completely from the school of the Netziv, where he learned from the Torah of the Gra. That's how Rav Tzvi Yehuda would say, his son. But we see here he has such a tremendous connection to Rav Nachman, and we know from his mother's side we have such a tremendous connection to Lubavitch. So who was he? So a beautiful thing about Rav Kook is that he's forcing us to do something that I hope we do for all of us. None of us are nothing. We're all Jews. We are Yehudim. And all these categories and labels are all just remnants of Galus, where we needed to figure out where we felt most at home. But we're Jewish, we're Jews, and we're connected to Torah to understand what Hashem wants of us. That's what Rav Kook was. But back then, there was a big chashash amongst a certain group in Breslov that Rav Kook was way too much carrying the flag of something that seemed to them to be contradicting to Torah values. And that is the world of Zionism. especially back then, when you didn't have the world of Zionism, religious Zionism, like you have today. Back then, to affiliate yourself with the world of Zionism spoke volumes. And we're going to see a correspondence right now between Rav Kook and a chassid in Uman. And this is very, very interesting. We're not yet, 1 second. Well, we'll get to that in a second. I just want to share with you who we're speaking about. We're speaking about a tzaddik in Breslov. His name was Riv Getzeler. And Riv Getzeler, he was they say about him, he was an ecstatic chassid, very special when it came to his tefillahs. He was born in 1884 in an area close to Uman, and he also had some connection through his mother to the family and the original students of Reb Nassim. So he's born into it. And he was a Mevakesh Hashem from a young age. He was forcefully drafted to the Russian army, and he went through tremendous nisyonos of Mesiras Nefesh while he was there. And because he really felt that the life of, just even being surrounded by people in the Russian army was going to blemish his neshama, he took upon himself like very, very big things when it came to tefillin. He put on Rashi, he put on Rabbeinu Tam. He also put on Kedas HaShemush HaRabba. It's a whole nother story. But when he was able to get out of there, and once he got married after the army, every night, chatzos, every night he would tovel in a frozen Ukrainian mikvah, and then he would daven and learn until in Alos HaShachar. And in those hours, he really would spend so much time writing chidushim. And he had nothing to do with this world, this Riv Getzeler. He was very, very poor. And I believe he made it to Eretz Yisrael. Yes, he made it to Eretz Yisrael. He made it to visit in Eretz Yisrael. And he got to know Rav Kook when he was in Eretz Yisrael. Now, Rav Kook, we see that he was in contact with Riv Getzeler when he was in Uman, when Riv Getzeler was back in Uman, and he asked him, we have a correspondence between the two where Rav Kook asks him specific questions in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, and he also would ask Rav Kook how the Breslover Hasidim in Uman were doing back then. So I believe that Rav Getzeler dies in 1918. So this must be the Tkufa where Rav Kook is in Yafo, where he's asking him these questions. And in one of the correspondences, he also attaches a book. Rav Kook attaches a book as a gift to him. And that book is a very famous book of Rav Kook, and it's called Eider Hayakar. It's one of the early Sfarim of Rav Kook. Eider stands for Eliyahu David Rabinowitz. That was Rav Kook's father-in-law. And it's a beautiful sefer where Rav Kook speaks about his father-in-law, and he puts in all these autobiographical pieces of his father-in-law's letters. But most of the sefer is really about machshava. And it was printed first in 1906, actually, by Rav Kook's brother, Rav Shmuel Kook. Later, it gets reprinted, and additional very important ma'amarim, very important discourses are added later, like Ma'amar Hador, Ma'amar HaPachad, Baruch Hashem, stuff that we've learned in the past. But he sends this sefer to Rav Getzeler. And Rav Getzeler answers him, and in this answer we could understand where there could possibly be misunderstanding or more of a concern amongst Breslover Hasidim about Rav Kook. So let's look at this letter, and we're going to end with learning this letter that Rav Getzeler sends back to Rav Kook. Bezrat Borei Shamayim Ba'aretz Po Uman Kirya Ne'emana, here in Uman. Shalom. The whole first paragraph is basically a beautiful, glorious, glamorous description of what he thinks about Rav Kook. Shalom Rav Hai Gaon, Adamel Achaneo Velo Yeda'atiu. I think I know you. I think I can call you names, but I don't really know who you are. Mecharchei Ra'ayonotav Atzitz Ve'er'e Ki Rav Ge'ono Ve'hadar Zivo. I looked a little bit into your Torah, and I could see you're just a genius. Bo akayem lo dumiyat teila. It's best if I just be quiet in explaining what I think about you. Reb Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, acharei drishat Shlomo HaTov. Riv Getzeler writes like this: Al ken bevadai hetaftem leorer bera'ayonotechem be'eder hayakar, aval lo yitachen ze ela be'archava, be'agdalat koach halimud ha'iyuni, בההשערה היקרה הנפלאה הזאת, ובספרי תלמידו הקדוש מורנו רב נסן ז"ל. So he basically, Riv Getzeler over here says it's clear that you've put a lot of work into your thought, into developing your thought, Rav Kook, in this manuscript Eder Hayakar. But if you would have only come on, can we mute David Orenstein's? Oh, I could do it. Sorry. Thank you. But he says over here something interesting. He says, but if you were well-versed or had access to Reb Nassan's Sfarim and Reb Nachman's Sfarim, there could have been an expansion of what you were speaking about in a more focused and directed way. Let's look at the next page. על כן יקיימנה כבודו המאמר חז"ל, אשרי הדור שהגדולים נשמעים לקטנים. So he says, I'm going to ask you what Khazam say. Praiseworthy is the generation where the bigger ones listen to the smaller ones. וכפי מה שראינו בספר עדר היקר, כי האיר השם את רוחכם הטוב להסתכל בצורתן של ישראל. So we see beautifully how Hashem has awakened you, your good spirit, to look at Am Yisrael, uleorer lev maskilei Yisrael lehishtadel betakanatan. And it's beautiful that we see through the manuscript of Eder Hayakar how you are not challenging, but approaching the enlightened ones, the maskilim, to try and get them out of the intellectual rut that many of them have gotten into. Now he says over here something very interesting, this Riv Getzeler to Rav Kook. Second paragraph, Ha'emet, Odeh velo yevosh, I'm going to admit, and I'm not embarrassed to admit, ki lo yesakti kol ra'ayonotav le'omko, that I haven't really grasped all the thoughts here and the machshava to its depth in the manuscript that you sent me. Why? Machmat milot hakashot vehazarot asher nimtzeu bo, because all these foreign and difficult words that I don't know, like Rav Kook, takes words quite often, English words or secular words, and he kind of throws them into the mix. So he says over here, Belov shom malbush nochri leman yitkabel be'enei kol. Riv Getzeler says, I know, Rav Kook, why you're writing in this kind of style where you're using secular words and you're kind of throwing it into the mix. It's because you want everyone to feel connected. You want to be received by people that are used to that kind of language, or that can understand that kind of language. והטוב עשה בעמיו, כל שכן בדברינו רבינו ז"ל, על פסוק משנה פניו ותשלחהו, עיין שם בסימן סמך, not for now. והנה גם בספרו ידבר בבחינה כזה, אך מי ייתן והאיר עליו אור הזה, אז יסגיב בכוחו כי כמוהו מורה, ומבקשים מאיתו שיכתוב לנו בקוצר, but we want to know, please, can you just condense what you were trying to say? מה כוונתו בספרו לעובדה ולמעשה? What are you tachlis saying, Rav Kook, in the manuscript? Regarding what? Regarding the next thing. Im kavanato derech hatzionut. If your kavana is that the mahalach of Am Yisrael should be going through derech hatzionut, asher ein da'atenu nocha mizeh. Riv Getzeler says, our derech, the Breslovers, our derech is not comfortable there. Why? Ki hu nichlal gamken bivchinas v'ayadayim yedei Esav. Because Esav's hands, he says, are a little bit too involved over here. It's amazing. He's saying, maybe Rav Kook, hakol kol Yaakov. What you're saying, what you're voicing is gewalt. But by Yadayim Yedei Esav, when it comes to how else it's mashpia, how Zionism is contaminated with the hands of Esav. Now I know, let's hold our horses. I grew up in a world that Zionism was the right way, and Zionism is emes. And I just want to say, I'm probably the biggest Zionist in the world, but not the Zionism of unfortunately what's happened over here today. It's the Zionism of Avram Avinu. It's the Zionism of Hashem. The biggest Zionist. But we have to understand most of the Hasidic world, kimat kulam, actually. It's very hard to hold and mekadesh Zionism, sanctify Zionism, when it's not really rooted. It's rooted subconsciously in the Torah and in emes. But it's not rooted in its foundation as a modern day movement. We understand how Riv Getzeler is saying we're very concerned because Hayadayim Yedei Esav o Kavana Acheres, because back then, let's say this letter was written in 1914, who was leading the flag of Zionism? You didn't have Rav Drukman in the world. You didn't have other Gedolim like we have Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. It was a different ballgame back then. And they were trying to understand Rav Kook. I say this with a little bit of pain. Unfortunately, Rav Kook has been still, I feel like he's been exempted he's been forcefully removed from the whole yeshivish world, and it's mamash a flaw. It's not true. Rav Kook's words are needed in every world of Torah. Every world of Torah. But it's all because of this, I believe, a misconception of Rav Kook that we felt we needed to label him as something when he's too big for any label. But the concern here of Riv Getzeler is, I saw this manuscript and I'm worried, I'm concerned. ואפשר יש אופן ספר כזה לבאר מילות הזרות אשר נמצא בספרו, כדי להשכיל משם בינה. He's saying maybe that there is a book where I could learn, that I could understand the words that you're putting in here, so that I would understand your kavana better. Ulelamed et elu, next paragraph. Harechokim atzrichim leshon kaze daika. Maybe it's really just a matter of you use this just so that you could educate those that need to learn through this kind of language. Tochlu levaer la'anshei Shlomeinu gam be'eretz Yisrael b'Tzfat u'Yerushalayim. He's saying maybe you could do better. You could explain what you really mean to our Anash means Anshe Shlomeinu, to our people, to our Breslover Chassidim that are in Eretz Yisrael. Back then it was mainly two spots, Tzfat and Yerushalayim. So just look at the bottom line over here. He says, Ne'um hashafel harotze b'ha'emet. These are the words of the shafel, the humble, the one who's very low, who just wants emes. Eliakim Getzeler libavne. What was he really saying over here to him? So we tried to understand this, but what he's really saying is that if Rav Kook would have used Rabbi Nachman's writings, he wouldn't need to have to dress those words in Lashon Zara, in foreign language. And he's really asking Rav Kook, please explain what you're saying and tell me, do you really mean over here that this is who you are and this is part of the world that you're in? I don't know of Rav Kook's response to him, but I do know that the relationship between Rav Kook and the Breslover Chassidim never ended. It lasted forever. And like we'll see specifically with someone like Reb Shmuel Horowitz, the relationship was much more than just, oh yeah, you guys are connected to a holy tzaddik. There was something going on here. We began speaking about the soul connection last year. We'll connect to it again next year, Bezrat Hashem. But of course, what I thought was going to be a 3-part series is already a 5-part series. So today was just part number 2. I look forward to continuing to having the schus to delve into this world of Rav Kook and the world of the light of Rabbi Nachman. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a wonderful day.